Hey everybody, welcome to Popcorn Therapy, where the stories we love tell us something about who we are. I'm really excited for today's episode. We're going to be talking about the F1 movie, which some of you might be excited about, some of you might not be. But I actually want to talk about masculinity through the lens of this movie with an old friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, David Hatfield, who's kind of an expert in this area. So I'm really excited for you to hear this conversation, even if you didn't watch the F1 movie. Before we jump into that conversation, there are a couple of things that I wanted to let you know. One, you might notice I am wearing my orange shirt today, my Every Child Matters shirt. It is in Canada the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. So it's a day where we remember what happened in Canada, this colonial country where my ancestors, people from England and other places, came and colonized Canada and took the land and resources away from the First Nations people, put them in residential schools, put them in reserves, and didn't support them the way that they promised to, and so on. And so I don't necessarily always do a land acknowledgement because it's a recording and it's kind of out there in the cloud. But I do want to say that I'm on Plains Cree land right now in Treaty 6 territory, and that the city that I live in used to be known as Beaver Hill House, which was a place where a lot of bands would come together. I'm a white lady, English and Irish, but that's not where I live. I'm in Canada, in this particular place where this is part of what happens on this land and what we want to come to understand about where we are in the world. So I wanted to make that land acknowledgement. Couple of other things I want to tell you. I got my advanced copy of Witch, Healer, Priestess, Outcast, which is the second book in my series on goddesses and divine feminine archetypes. This is the first one, called Maiden, Warrior, Mother, Crone. I'm obsessed with these stories. I am hoping I can write a third, fourth, fifth. We'll see how many I can write. But I absolutely love working with these stories and these folk tales. And this second book in the series is just a little darker than the first one. There's a little bit more spicy stuff in some of the stories. They're slightly longer. So you can pre-order that now. Pre-orders really help with the algorithm of it all, but these books will be available everywhere. I just found out the book is going to be in both Target and Walmart, which is actually, you probably think that means nothing, but from a publishing perspective, that's really awesome. So you can get them there, and you can get them at your local bookstore as well. You can request it if they don't already have it, which they might. You can ask. Okay. Second thing I want to tell you, there is a new way that you can get tarot readings with me, which I'm quite excited about. So normally the way I do tarot readings is they're a little bit like counseling. So you come live or in person and we read the cards together. We talk about the themes that come up. We sort of process the tarot reading together, which is a really wonderful way to do it. And I also am going to be offering non-live video recordings that you can request. So if you purchase, let's say, a one-card pull, you can ask me a question like, should I stay at my job or should I quit? I'll pull one card for you. I will record that session so you won't attend. I will record it just for you using my intuition, tell you about the card and so on, send you the download link. You can watch it on your own time. I'm also offering a 5-card spread, which is a little more detailed if you want to work through a specific situation. And there's also a year ahead spread, which is sort of my favorite thing to give for a gift. For someone like on a birthday, we go through one card for each month of the year upcoming. And you'll have that downloaded, recorded, so that you can refer back to it as you go through the year. And again, you do not attend these sessions. Okay, that's all I wanted to tell you before we start this session. Please enjoy this conversation with my dear friend, David Hatfield. Here we go. All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Popcorn Therapy with me, Julie Peters. And I am so excited to have my guest, David Hatfield, with me today to talk about the F1 movie. And I met David many years ago when I attended one of the all-gender sessions of Manology, which was a men's group in Vancouver. And we became friends, and I got involved with that community and helped facilitate a few sessions and things like that. And, kind of can't express how much I learned from just being with this group of men and with David's really sensitive facilitation of that group. So I'm really excited to be able to be here and talk about masculinity, which has been a little bit of a theme. Those of you that have been listening to the podcast the last few episodes, it's been something that's come up. We've been talking about masculine archetypes and things like that. So I'm so excited to get David's view. And David, I would love to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. What do you want to say about who you are and where you are now and all of that stuff?
Oh, wow. Thank you, Julie. It's great to see you and to do this with you today. It's a real treat for me. So thank you for inviting me. I'm a facilitator, and I've been facilitating boys and men and masculinity stuff. Is where I started my career about 30 years ago. And so other things have grown in alongside of that, but that thread has gone through the whole time. And that manology group that you've talked about, we're in our 16th year now. So that is carried on. That's my local Vancouver men's work. And since then I've become very interested in I started off with the boys and men doing assertiveness training and violence prevention. So conflict has been a big part of my professional interest. Yeah, I'm really interested in holding space for people to explore change processes within themselves. And yeah, I work as a leadership coach now in the healthcare authority here in Vancouver. And but it's been really interesting. And I don't know if I would have watched that film if you hadn't have pointed it out to me. I'm not following a lot of film these days anyway, but in that way. But it was really cool watching it in terms of like getting ready to talk to you about it today. So I'm stoked to be here.
It's a different way of watching for sure when you're thinking about
Definitely.
these things. And I'll just share a brief story of my own experience with manology. I'm trying to remember how long ago it was now that I first showed up there. It was a long time ago, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe 15 years ago, yeah. And I'm a counselor now, and I have a bit of a special interest in working with men. I think partly because of my experience at Manology. When I came to those all-gender sessions and had this opportunity to hear about men's inner world in a way that, not that I had never heard that before, but it was such a different context than, my family members or my boyfriends or whatever it is, like even male friends that I'd had or whatever. Being in a room where men could really share what they were going through, I think it humanized men for me in a way that I hadn't realized that I had this objectified idea of what men were. And one of the reasons I want to talk about this movie with you today, or one of the layers I think that comes up for me around masculinity and pop culture, is that I see a lot in my Instagram algorithm or whatever it is. It's these sort of like funny, jokey things like, oh, men, let's just get rid of all of them, or like, oh, men are such jerks. Like there's a lot of that has been around for a really long time, sort of a man-hating sort of a quality that can, I think, from a woman's perspective, it feels like protective to say that stuff, or it feels like validating if you've been hurt by a man. But then there are actual human beings behind that, right, that are trying to live their lives and do their best and all of those things. And so I've been curious about how that's impacting men. But, I think the dehumanization of men is something that I fell prey to, and I see it in this movie.
Mm.
So let's do a quick recap of the F1 movie. Those that are listening may not have watched it, which is okay, though I think we will. I like being able to do spoilers because often I find the ending of the movie matters to what the movie means. Yeah. So we will get there. Okay. But just to recap, to remind those that are watching before we really jump into it, we've got Sonny Hayes, who is an older guy played by Brad Pitt, who used to be this sort of racing star. He got injured in a crash, and then it's that sort of coming out of retirement trope that we see often in masculinized movies, I think.
Can I jump in with something?
Please, yeah.
He doesn't just get injured, he nearly dies. And to me, that's
right.
Extremely important in this film. He nearly dies, and he's kind of retired in some way from seeking fame and fortune. He just wants to race. So he's never, he did stop for a while, but then he's been racing wherever he can find a car. He doesn't care what kind of car, what kind of race it is, if it's out in the desert somewhere on a racetrack. He just races, and then he leaves. He'll join a team, do a couple races, and then moves off to the next thing. He doesn't stop racing initially. Like he's in the Daytona 500 or something at the beginning of the film. It's a very serious race. But he's got, his spine is fused. There's a big scar on his back. So, another good jolt, let alone another crash, could wipe out his body, or could obviously kill him, could kill anybody, but he's damaged. His body has been seriously damaged by that big crash when he was young. So he's facing death in two ways when he races again. Like obviously just a crash that kills him, or a crash that maims him and he can't move his body properly anymore, or walk or whatever. Yeah.
Right. So he's taking these extreme risks as he goes.
Yeah.
He joins this team with this young sort of upstart that he calls JP, Joshua Pierce, played by Damson Idris. And part of the plot is how they're getting along or not getting along. And JP is a pretty sort of arrogant, young, talented racer that doesn't want to take advice from, the older guy and so on. And that's part of the trope of this movie as well. Mm-hmm. And that's it. That's generally what happens, I guess. And then, adventures, ensue.
It's Brad Pitt, so there's a love interest.
Yes, right. And there's a love interest. Yeah. But yeah, I'd love to ask you first, what did you think about this movie? Like, did you like it? Did you enjoy it? What were your initial thoughts?
So I watched it twice, and the first time I watched it, I was sleep deprived, and I was struggling with some sleep loss. So I think that colored my vision a little bit, but I just didn't like it at all. I just found myself wanting to not like it the further it went on, because I've seen this movie a million times. We've all seen this movie. We've seen this story a zillion times, and you've used the word trope a bunch of times. I'm like, yeah, like, can somebody do something different? Well, why are these huge movie stars doing this movie? They have choice. They don't need the money. Like, and then I watched it again in the last couple of days, and I really liked it a lot more. I got a lot more nuance out of it, and it became more interesting to me. And again, I probably wouldn't have watched it twice if I wasn't going to be talking about it with you, but it was a good reminder to me to always look deeper than a first impression. So one major theme that I want to front up here, and we can come back to it, I won't try and do the whole thing here. It's like, so whenever you work with a group of men, whenever I worked with a group of men or been in a men's group, and you get together and talk for long enough, the concept of initiation comes up. So this is rites of passage from being a boy to being a man, just in most basic terms. And it comes up because on some level men know that most men in Western culture who are not indigenous know that they were never initiated properly. At some point they realize nobody was there for me, nobody showed me, nobody told me, nobody supported me when it was crucial for my development as a person, or I was heading down a really bad path and nobody seemed to notice or step in. Or I wanted to learn something and I couldn't find anybody around. There was no mentor around. And for me, Sonny's crash is his initiation, but it's very incomplete. And so he displays a wide range of sort of reactions to his own life and to his experiences, to his circumstances, some of which are very sort of elderful and mature in the way he sometimes works with JP, and other times he's just as much a brat and an adolescent kind of psychology as JP is. Yeah, he says, back in the day he wanted to be the best in the world. He was going to be next in line to be the champion of the world, and that was his ambition before the crash. And now he just wants that hit of transcendence that sometimes comes in racing, where he enters what I think in psychology we call the flow state, where he's just at one with the car, everything slows down, he's at peace, he's not racing anymore, he's flying. He talks about, I get chills on my legs when I say the word flying. He's just flying. And then the race is over, or he never got there. And so it's like he seeks it again, and he's done with this race. Even if he wins it, he moves on to the next one. He's looking for the next hit, like the way some people talk about drug addiction as incomplete initiation. So it's an incomplete initiation where he's kind of in it for himself. His goal doesn't really bring value to anyone else, unless he wins a race or his team wins or something, but he doesn't really care about that. And so he doesn't really know how to enter that flow state in relationship to other people or to nature, etc. So he's somewhat doomed to this isolative, vagabond lifestyle, living in his van and going from race to race. He does look out for people. He displays ethics and morals sometimes. He lets Jordan win at poker and become the number one driver for a race. He doesn't sell out his longtime friend, Ruben, as sort of buddy and manager of the team. He's honest with the love interest that he's not going to stay. Like, he does display some virtue and some ethics. So there's kind of a mix of juvenile behavior and then mature behavior. And in the end, the thing that hooks him back into all of it is like his friend telling him it's F1, like the highest tier of racing. And if you win a race, you get to say on that day you were the best in the world. And that line comes when he does, first spoiler, it's like no surprise to anybody probably, but he actually wins a race. And they say that sentence together, he and his buddy. And so he is still kind of hooked on that boyish thing. So to me, it's a real good example of how most of us, myself included, are incompleted men with incompleted initiations. And so the perils and the pitfalls and the possibilities of being in that kind of state. So I thought it was a good film for showing that kind of range of characteristics.
Yeah. So maybe you can talk a little bit more about initiation. I think of initiation, I guess, as a ritual, or something that's ritualized. And I want to hear more about addiction as incomplete initiation. I want to understand that more.
Okay. So, there's many people, thinking about this and writing about it, and I've gone in a long way, but there's many people who've gone a lot further, so I'm going to do it in my way. So in the simplest sequence that people write about in initiation is a separation from normality, this is identity stuff. I should say that first. So moving from a young person identity, and this is true for women as well in all genders, from the youth version of that, or the child version of that, to the early adulthood version of that. It's a very different identity. It's a very different way to relate to your body, to your sense of purpose in the world, to how people relate to you and see you, to your sense of responsibility and agency in the world. It grows as you grow. But as a child, you don't have any of that. So it's very, very new to start to confront that territory. So an initiation sequence is a recognition in a traditional model. There's a recognition that everyone's going to go through this because everybody has. All the adults have gone through this because the culture is fully literate in that practice. Everyone's involved. And so there's a deep literacy. People understand how it works and what role that you're going to play, no matter what part of the community you are. So if you're a boy, when you're 12 or 13, somewhere around there, you, in the West African style, which is the one I've learned more about in terms of I want to give praise here and recognition to Malidoma Some. Many people in your podcast will probably know. He was a Burkina Faso man who shared a lot of his, he wrote about his initiation, and he worked on that a lot in North America. And he became a central figure in a lot of the men's work, actually, up and down the West Coast here in the 90s, I'd say, sharing that traditional wisdom. So he has an amazing story I won't go into, but Malidoma Some, like a great elder and leader. So you would be taken, emphasis on the word taken from your home, maybe in the middle of the night. People know it's coming, but the mothers will try and stop you, and there's this joke among shamans. Shamans don't walk with sticks because they're lame and they need support to walk. They walk with a stick to protect themselves from mothers. So when they take the son away, everyone knows, like, the initiations are so severe that there's no guarantee your son will even survive, literally, let alone be injured. He's gonna suffer. So separation from the norm. So the boys are taken in a group of men who have known them their whole lives but are not their parents. So your dad might be there, but he's not in control of anything. He's just there. And they're removed from the village. They're removed to a place on the land that they probably don't know and haven't been before, which is really important. So you spend a certain amount of time being separated from the regular food, the regular rhythms, the regular people, and you're there long enough to start to let go of some aspects of your identity and have a chance to, like in a facilitated space that you and I create, experiment with yourself in new ways, be given new challenges, be given new information, and start to integrate those, play with them, work with them, And so some of it's didactic education. Like here's what it means to be a father. Let's talk about it. And so now we're moving into the middle stage, which is often called the ordeals, the threshold area, where you're given challenges, tasks, assignments. And some of the classic ones we might know about here is like a sweat lodge, the physical ordeal of extreme heat for hours, or the walkabout is well known in Australia. So going off into the land and fending for yourself in nature, like deep connection to nature, and being trained like how to do that, and then being tested like now you're going to do it. It's fascinating to read the ordeals around the world. They're often extremely painful, or extremely lonely. There's one with like bungee jumping, I believe, comes from initiation work, where the men would build a scaffold using vines and wood and build this thing, and then not only are you going to jump off, you're trusting that the adult men built this right. And if they didn't, you're going to die. It's that simple. Or you're going to be very badly injured. And so trust in adults, trust in eldership, trust in older men is a part of this. And men being very compassionate, not just fierce, but compassionate and loving towards you, but also like, it's kind of, I think Malidoma wrote about it one day as like being introduced to the collective terrors and challenges of your people in your time and place in the world. So in other words, by the time you come back, we can count on you to handle yourself in an attack, a war, to handle yourself if there's a famine, if there's a flood, if there's pestilence, if there's fire or something. Like, you will not freeze and panic. You've been through something similar already. It's in your body, and we trained you well enough to survive. So we can count on you to hold your role, even if nobody's helping you. So education, challenge, ordeals, and also helping a young man or young woman see and connect to their deep sense of purpose. Like, why are you here? Some of you are going to be medicine people. Some of you are going to be fathers and work in the home. Some of you are going to be warriors and hunters. Some of you are going to be a blacksmith. Some of you are going to be a physiotherapist, merging the old and the new here. And so we need to connect you with people who know about those things, because we want to support that, because we need those services in the community. And this is something I love to speak about. It's like, if we can do this really well, then in modern times, let's say, we're going to send you back knowing that the world is full of drugs and online gambling and all kinds of ways that you can really, get into trouble. And for you to feel so valued by the community that when you wake up in the morning, you're like, I want to do my thing. I want to do the thing I do. And the world's going, your community's saying, yeah, thank you. That's great. We love your thing that you do, your service, your purpose matters to us. We value it. Please do it again. You do so great. That if somebody offers me one of those, side routes to trouble, that I have too much to lose. I have too much to lose. I have too many people to let down to make that appealing to me. It's too big a risk. I wouldn't do it. And I think that's one of the basic ways that we can help young people stay out of trouble, is to help them find their deep, deep purpose and really get them on that path in a very concrete, deep, connected way, and to set up that reciprocity between purpose and community and appreciation, and it just goes around and around beautifully. It can last a lifetime. Yeah. So that's the ordeals part. So the ceremonial part is often what people think about a lot. But in the field, we know that the ceremonial part is not the most important. It's not the biggest. The biggest part is how you come home and how you integrate what happened into day-to-day life, because that's where you're going to spend most of your life. It's not in ceremony. It's day-to-day. So this is where, for the contemporary rite of passage practitioner, this part is almost the hardest, because the age-old desire for initiation is there. You can work with that. The land and nature is always there to support it and welcome it. And the psyche wants it on some level. We want to be welcomed into the world of men, let's say, for the boys. And just say, I am using gender binary here just for shorthand. There's a lot of work being done around working with all genders, working with transgender identity people, and so on. So when we bring young people back, say when I was doing initiatory work at Pearson College in the summers, on Vancouver Island in a youth leadership program that I really saw as a rite of passage program. And that's the way I showed up there. Near the end, the first year I was there, the kids started to freak out. I mean, freak out. Running away into the woods so we couldn't find them to send them home. Lying down in front of buses and vans so their friends couldn't leave. Like they did not want to leave that container. And part of it is because they knew a lot of them, they wouldn't see each other again. They were coming from every continent but Antarctica, literally. So very far flung. And many of them going back to their country by themselves. And so the loneliness, but also realizing their school system, their family, their friends, were not going to be able to understand what they'd been through. In other words, the literacy was not there for how to receive a young person from such an experience in a way that honors, recognizes, validates, and supports the ongoing journey that container opened up and encouraged. So that's what's supposed to happen, is we come back to an initiated community that knows, okay, we call you by your adult name now. We never use your boyhood name anymore. There are different pronouns that may be in play in different cultures. In many societies, the boy and the mother would not speak to each other or be alone together for a full calendar year. They would have no contact because the fear is that the bond between mother and son is so powerful that the young man will slip back to being a boy. It's a way of honoring that bond, not diminishing it. And so people knew how to do that. They knew how to support that work. And now we do our best, and that used to be one of my grand frustrations. Was like, I would say, like I'm trying to purify this little thing of water and help it become clear and clean and know itself. And then when it's over, we just throw it back in the river it came from. And good luck. See ya. And so it's a very, very difficult challenge. So initiation is one of the core practices. It's been found in every single studied culture in the world, as far as I know. Regardless of where we were in the world, the ancients knew that this was vital to the sustainability of their community, is that they had to mark that change between childhood and early adulthood in a very deep and powerful way. And they all figured out different ways to do it based on their land and culture and so on. But it's a beautiful uniformity and universality. And we've let it go. The colonizers came and just went, this is all indigenous stuff. Like, let's just put it away. And we pay a huge price for it. And I'd say especially with boys and men. I'll finish with this. Because that fire, that drive that Sonny has, like what drives him to drive is this utter compulsion for transcendence. It's like that level of energy and focus is beautiful. Let's put it to use for something more than one guy getting off on having a transcendent moment like I do when I hit 10 free throws in a row and I'm in the flow state. It's like, I know that it doesn't really matter. It's really great. It feels good. But if we could direct that into something more meaningful and that reciprocity of community and individual and community and individual, that would be a beautiful reorienting of such energy. Instead, what we get is that fire. This is a Michael Mead quote. Michael Mead's really well known for this work. No, it's not. He quotes it. I believe it's more of an African proverb. That I hate that terminology, African proverb. I don't know what country, what culture, what group, but I'm just going to go with the gut of it because that's what I have right now. If the young people of the community, especially the boys, do not feel the warmth, the warmth, the caring, the welcoming of community, they will burn down the village just to feel the warmth.
Whoa. Okay. So, yeah, I'm having so many feelings and reactions as you're talking about that. As a mother, of course, there's a bit of two boys, right? I have two boys, and my bond with them is incredibly strong. And I can kind of relate to no, you're not throwing my son off a cliff or whatever it is to initiate him. Like, I can sort of relate to that. Like, you might have to beat me off with a stick to, that deep desire I have to protect my children, is so strong. And I also feel like, wow, yes, that makes so much sense. The idea of Sonny as in the incomplete initiation of that he's felt some of that fire, some of that intensity, some of that purpose, but it just goes like flat in a culture that kind of communicates to men over and over, you're only valuable if you win the prize, if you win the competition, if you have the fame and fortune. And the men that I work with, I'm thinking of them, I'm thinking of my husband, I'm thinking of my boys, like, and Sonny and Joshua as well in this movie. Like, I think the F1 movie, for me, it's sort of a silly movie that, as you said, we've seen a million times before. I couldn't help but think of Disney Pixar's Cars, because it's like the same plot, as Lightning McQueen. It's very similar. I was just like, oh, I know this and I know Mario Kart. Like, that's my familiarity with this world, right? Yeah. But it's actually quite a sad story, and that's part of what I wanted to talk about, is that I feel like it's so this world is like so devoid of meaning, purpose, and really connection. I feel like that's something that I really see in this movie, is that, I kind of see Sonny as, I actually see Brad Pitt as an archetype. I feel like he's always played the same character over and over again in so many of the movies that he's been in, where he's this really self-assured guy who knows how to be extremely powerful and violent, if necessary, in these different roles. And there's this laugh he does, this sort of unaffected laugh that you see a few times in this movie, where it's just like, I'm Brad Pitt, and that's what I do, right? And what I thought about in this movie, among other things, was that he misses out on connection over and over again, right? He misses out on the mentorship relationship he could have had with Joshua. He misses out on the love relationship he could have had with Kate, her name is, with Kate.
From Ireland. I loved her accent.
Yes, Kate. Well, I love that actor as well. I think she did a really amazing job. But I feel like her characterization was also kind of disappointing. And the way that it sort of ended up being this one night stand, and then he's just like, I'm leaving, and she's like, of course you are, because you're Brad Pitt, and that's what you're supposed to do, and that's how you're a model for these boys, right? And so, he loses out on connection over and over again, and at the end, it's supposed to be this happy ending that he's just continuing to risk his life for this moment of transcendence that, as you say, doesn't really mean anything. And then I think in what you were talking about with this concept of initiation, and a culture that understands that, and a culture that shows boys how they are valuable and continues to value them in lots of different kinds of ways, I'm terrified of when, I mean, it's already happening now to a degree, but when my boys really start accessing, the internet, porn, drugs, like there's going to be so much there's so much danger for them. And I think that a lot of that danger comes from a place of, I don't really know who I am or what my value is. And so right now we're in this moment in this culture where there's all these interesting things happening around feminism and gender fluidity and stuff like that. And we've come a long way in a lot of ways, which is really powerful. And I think a lot of women and non-cisgendered genders have an opportunity to think about their identity, what that means, how to be in community, how to feel valued, how to have purpose, all of those things. And for men, it's like the same story it's always been in patriarchy, which is, provider, protector, maybe like you can have those roles, you can have the fame and fortune, and otherwise, it's not valuable. So I see a lot of men still struggling with that concept of, is connection even valuable to me? Do I even deserve connection? And then you see movies like this that are just continuing to perpetuate those stereotypes of masculinity. And there's a real sadness, I think, that comes up in me in imagining, with my orange shirt on today and Truth and Reconciliation and all those things, we lost so much with that colonial moment, right? Like we lost so much with a culture coming in that was highly Christianized specifically. And it was this idea of like Christianity, Catholicism specifically, it's the only way, this is the civilized way. We have to save these people by taking away their rituals, culture, language, everything that makes them who they are, and show them how to be good Catholic, good Christians, and so on, and like fit everybody into this one box. And, from my perspective as a white person, I have Irish ancestry and English ancestry. And there was colonization there too, from that same Catholic perspective, right? Like there is a spirituality, Celtic mythology that I've been really looking into. There's a language there I have no connection to. And there are indigenous practices that many of whom only survive because Christian monks wrote some of it down because it wasn't written in language, right? So so much of it has been lost. It's like this trading of connection to community and spirituality in order to have the privilege of being white, being Catholic, being male, maybe. So yeah, I think there's so much coming up for me around what you're talking about here.
Yeah. We're really opening it up. Yeah, and so I'm going to come back to the ceremony idea and the outlawing of ceremony. And so, indigenous people did not have alcohol, to the best of my knowledge. Alcohol was introduced. And there you get like the shorthand ceremony, the suffering without insight, the ordeal without instruction, and the compulsion to do it again because it works. It gets you to the altered state that a ceremony, it gets you to an altered state as a ceremony should. And you can do it with other people, and it's enjoyable. For many people, it's very pleasurable. It's relaxed. It's fun. You don't feel so good afterwards, but that can be true in a ceremony as well. But it's not done the right way, to put it into shorthand terms. It's not done the right way, so you have to do it again and again and again. And so it's a compassionate way to look. It's another lens of compassion to look through compulsion and addiction. It's like this person might be trying to initiate themselves. And initiation, I want to make the point too, that initiation is not a one-shot deal for any of us. Even if you had a beautiful, community-sited, supported, proper initiation into adulthood, you're going to go through a lot of other life situations, some jarringly quick and some over time, that also require initiation. I just finished a 14-year journey with my studies that I mentioned at the beginning. And I knew when I did those exams, whenever I did them, I wanted to mark that territory and with an initiatory quality. And so I went to Europe for 3 months. And I did do the walk around thing for sure, but so I was traveling, I was a tourist, but I was also very clear that I was taking 3 months, most of it like unpaid time off work. Like nobody's gonna pay me to take that much time off. And it's a privilege to be able to do that in the first place. Let's just say, because that's foundational. But I wanted to be away long enough to kind of get lost in it. And then when I came home, it's like I didn't go straight back to work. I had 12 days at home before I went back to work as part of that journey. And all of that was my attempt to incorporate my rites of passage learning in for myself. It's like nobody else is going to do this with me. I didn't graduate with anybody else. I was on a self-directed journey. I didn't want it that way, but that's how it was. And my teachers were all down in the States. Like, I'm going to celebrate this myself mostly. My friends will come in alongside when they do. And I've had some beautiful, appreciations from people and recognition of the journey. But, so a breakup, a health diagnosis, an accident and injury, a job loss, a job change, moving to a different city, starting a new relationship, falling in love, having a death somewhere near me. All of those things require some sort of initiatory quality. Your identity is being shifted quite dramatically. Again, aging, the process of aging is one itself. You can try and deny it if you want, but it's happening and it's unstoppable. So how do you relate to it? What is your identity as you age? Becoming a parent, right? I have a friend who lost a child at 24 last year. Huge initiatory experience. Fortunately, this person is a deep Buddhist, so that they have access to eldership, they have access to ceremony, they have access to inner work. So in the absence of all of that, what do? We're so susceptible to getting lost. And this idea, I coach people all the time on you're going through a transition, right? A new job within the same organization, moving up the ladder of leadership. Who am I now? I don't feel like imposter syndrome. That's an incomplete initiation. You need support. You need someone to tell you, this is natural. You're fine. You're supposed to be disoriented right now. Take some time. It's fine. It's natural for you to feel that way. Let's identify, locate yourself in that. There's nothing new about this. It's as old as people. So this, and I don't think that a lot of Hollywood writers actually are initiated people. So it makes sense to me that they continue to perpetuate storylines of incomplete initiation, because that's what we're in, right? Look at our eldership, or forget what I just said. Let's look at our political leadership through the lens of initiation. Who's there? When I look through that lens, I don't see anybody. And I've heard a African Canadian gospel musician who was also a police officer in the United States say once that the uninitiated white male is the most dangerous animal on earth in the West. And I was like, that's powerful. For me, that was just the thing I kept seeing all over this movie. It's everywhere. Yeah, and to what you said, like he's kind of doomed to this aloneness, this lone wolf. She calls him a lone wolf, and I thought she was the best actor in the film. Actually, I thought she was the most
Kate.
Authentically, present, consistent authenticity in her acting. The Irish woman Kate, who's the first female race car designer or something like that, and she's out to prove something too. So she's also trying to initiate herself. She wants the validation of the community, right? Like I can do this too. In this room full of men, I can do this too. But yeah, he doesn't even seem aware of the possibility that transcendence can come through relationship. You know, whether it's friendship, like when the two friends first meet each other in the laundromat. At first you think, what is going on here? And then it turns out they know each other, but they have this patter of aloofness and put-downs as their kind of currency of love and friendship. And it's only in certain moments in the film where they'll blurt out something that's not bullshit or a joke. Like when he's hurt, and they're in the hospital and Ruben, I need this. It's like one sentence. I mean, they could have spent half an hour showing how men can relate deeply. And I'm like, the writers don't know how to do that because that's not who they are. And that's where I get really sad in this film. I share your sadness. Like he sort of seems happy-go-lucky, but he doesn't. To me, he doesn't. He just seems like hungry. He's just hungry, and he's unable to satiate his need, and he'll die that way. He'll get killed in the crash. They showed in the closing credits. The last race he goes into is like in the Sahara or something. And these vehicles go flying over dunes. I'm like, that's not good for a guy with like metal rods in his spine. Like what, like this could be the last race, buddy. Like this is not a good idea. At least the other one, you're on flat ground, and in Formula One, you're on flat ground.
Yeah, I think I hadn't actually thought of Sonny as addicted, but I think that's a really good point, that's part of what's happening there. And, as a counselor, the way that I work with addiction is that the addicted part of someone is a part that is trying to protect them from deep pain, which is often related to shame, which I feel like you could think about here as being related to that sense of not being valued in the community, not having a sense of purpose, not having been initiated in the ways that you're talking about. And I think this perspective is really helpful, that idea that when you're using, a substance or a behavior, whatever it is that the addicted part uses, it's trying to take you to that state out of mind, right? It's trying to take you to that altered state so that you can touch on something which Sonny identifies as, like flying, or, however he describes it, that moment of transcendence. But as you say, with the addicted part, it's like you can touch on that moment of feeling connected or feeling beauty or feeling, whatever it is that you do, but then you go right back to where you were before, and there's nothing can kind of change about that. So you have to keep chasing it. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a really interesting perspective there. And, one of the tropes that I noticed in this movie, and I agree that we've seen this movie over and over again. It's just the type of movie to be marketed to men specifically. So, it's Days of Thunder. It's it's cars. It's it's all of these tropes that we've seen before. And so I was curious to think like, okay, what's being marketed to men these days? Like, what's the story? And I thought it was interesting to see where there was that moment of finding out like, oh, Sonny has these injuries where like one more crash could kill him, and so he shouldn't be driving at all. And then I was so curious in that moment, oh, is he gonna die in this movie? And I thought, if he had given over to Damson Idris to win the race, he would have had to die for that. Or if he had decided he wanted to be in relationship with Kate, he would have had to die. Like in the perspective of this movie, like the way that these stories have to go is that if a man chooses connection, he has to die. I saw the movie Wolverine many years ago. Mm-hmm. Which was one of these. I was on a date. It was like one of these movies that is very much marketed to men. And it was just that. It's like often, if a man or a masculine character, even Wolverine, who has superpowers, develops a connection. In this case, it was a connection to someone that was like a daughter figure for Wolverine. He has to die saving her. That happens in The Last of Us, which I talked about on this podcast a little while ago, because Joel has this deep connection, this father-daughter connection with this girl. He has to die for that. You rarely see men surviving connection in these movies. And so seeing that with Sonny, where because he didn't connect, because he took the win for himself, and because he left and didn't stay with Kate in this connection, he was able to survive this film because he could maintain that lone wolf archetype. But I feel like it's sort of the similar thing where, there's this trope of the virgin is the only one who can survive the horror movie. Things have moved on from that, but like the old trope of horror movies is that only the virgin could survive because she was pure and she was good, and therefore she could survive. It's like everyone else who had sex or whatever it was, they would be punished from the perspective of the horror movie. And often horror is about eradicating social fears, right? It's like getting rid of the social quote-unquote monsters that we have. And so I think there's something interesting about how men who choose to connect get killed off so often in these movies, because that's a social monster in a way. It's like a man who connects is weak. He's not a real man. He doesn't belong in the society, all of these things. And so we'd rather see Sonny Hayes survive by remaining the lone wolf Brad Pitt archetype who never really shows weakness, right? Yeah. And so I thought, that's interesting that like he could have died, and they actually set that up. It felt punishing to me, like horror movie style.
Interesting. There's a couple things, and there's so many things going. One of them, just briefly to say, I'm a cisgendered man, and I'm also working on my identity. I don't think it's just people with more marginalized identities. Like, what's it mean to be a cisgendered, white, straight man? To me now is very different than it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. Very different. In some ways, very similar. And I'm not trying to equate my experience to that of a trans person or something in terms of how I navigate society. It's not all the same. But that's another thing. It's another aspect of diversity of gender, or sexuality and so on. So everyone's in it. We're all working on it together, and I think that's part of the power of men coming together. Inside of our diversity, there's something similar as well. Yeah, like it's the connect or die thing. It's like if he'd stayed, what dies is the vagabond life. Like there's a symbolic death, not necessarily a literal death. But yeah, you have to give something up. That's initiation. You don't get to stay a child forever. Even his name, Sonny, it's like a boyish name. Right? Sonny. Hey, Sonny. What comes to mind is like an older man talking, or an older person talking to a boy, right? And Hayes, they never said his name Hazy as a nickname in the film, but it got mentioned as a complaint. His name was Hazy, and I'm like, also metaphorically interesting. Like, yeah, he's somewhat hazy as a person. He's very, he's equally liable to be very childish or very, very elderful at the turn of a hat. So I want to point out something that Robert Bly, who was a major figure in that Malidoma Some era, he was a poet and wrote a book called, I'm going to forget the name now, based on a Grimm's fairy tale. Became very, very well known in North America for that book, and became a major figure in the men's work at the time. And definitely a polarizing, interesting figure. he talked about that a lot of Hollywood writers are men, which is true and still true, and that there's a deep psychological anger they have with their fathers for not initiating them, for not being there, for not being more. And so often they do kill off the father figure gets killed. And this is their way of working that incomplete initiation, that wound. When that father figure dies, it's also the end of any relationship possibility. There's no place to grow the relationship anymore. And this is my main complaint with virtually all mainstream TV shows and movies, is the level of dialogue and relational exchange that goes on is mostly people avoiding truth, people not saying what they really feel, fear of openness, fear of authenticity, until things come to a crazy, complicated head, and then somebody bursts. And then that's the end of the scene. And I'm like, no. That's the beginning of the scene. Now show us what happens. Show us how did the other person even respond? Where did they go from here? They just stopped bullshitting. Now we're getting real. And this is where I feel, I don't know, I feel arrogant saying it. Part of me is like, oh, you shouldn't talk like this. The other part goes, say it. This is where our storytellers are at in their own development. It's like they don't know how to keep going because they're not doing that in their own lives. If they were, I believe with every bone in my body, they would want us to see that. They would want us to go into that part of the story. And that part of the story for me is the redemptive part that is missing in most of these fables that we're telling, like F1. It's like nothing really happened in the end.
Yeah.
Everybody's doing what they were doing before the whole story took place. And they're even less connected than they were. It was just a moment in time, and then everything was, and it's like we're not going to survive that as a culture, as a planet. We won't survive that if we keep the same thing. It's like, I want to see a different story. I want to see the one that we're actually in.
Right.
And the sheer amount of people involved in that team, like the F1 team, the technology, all to shave tenths of seconds so somebody can win, and it's about money and fame and fortune. It's like, that story is killing the world.
Yeah. Period.
So let's stop telling that story. It's not actually, there's no eldership in the construction and the reconstruction of a story that anybody from, if they're even, half considering the state of the world right now, that's not doing anything for anybody, really. It's not a story for the greater good. And so it's a whole group of uninitiated, incomplete initiated people going back to the same well for the same little hit, but we're not actually moving the dial on anything important. Sorry, Brad.
Yeah, so I'm writing a book right now on tarot and mythology, and so one of the things I was doing is storytelling the Fool moving through the major arcana, which is the Fool's journey is the classic Joseph Campbell hero's journey.
What's arcana mean?
Oh, just the major arcana are the 21 or 22 major cards of the tarot deck, and then the minor arcana are like the pip cards, the suit cards. And I'm writing a Tristan and Isolde actually for the minor arcana, so there's a different one there. But it's interesting to find myself. I've been doing all these goddess stories, and I'm finding myself writing from the male perspective. So the Fool is for me a queer male, and Tristan is the story that it's like his perspective when what he's going through in the next part of it. But the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell talks about is, starting from the status quo, and then you go through this whole journey. You have to go to the underworld, which you would say is initiation, right? You meet the devil there. And then you come back up again to the world that you were in before. But it's important that it be the same but different, right? That something's different about you when you return to the world. And I think you're right that this story doesn't do that, right? It's sort of like there's a little bit of a circle that happens, but you return to the top and it's almost like a straight line. Like it's just a little blip of, the possibility of connection was opened and then closed. The possibility of Sonny, I think, taking his ego down and letting somebody else win, like the opportunity was there and he didn't take it. One thing I do find interesting about this movie is we can talk about Joshua a little bit as well, because he has his own initiatory story there as well, and I'm sure you'll have more to say about that. But one thing I found interesting about the production is that Simone Ashley, she filmed in this movie, like she had a part in this movie as Joshua Damson Idris's girlfriend. And all her scenes were cut, just completely deleted from this movie. And she spoke out at one point just kind of saying, you know, I'm disappointed, and I do wonder if it's because of the color of my skin, right? She's a dark-skinned actor. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was interesting to look at the movie from that perspective, where we really focus on Brad Pitt here, right? We really focus on Sonny Hayes. He is the star of this movie. There's a moment when he has a little connection with the other blonde woman, who is the one who is on the Pitt crew. Yep. And I had a moment of being like, ooh, is the romance going to be with her? Like, she's so young, right? And I was relieved that the romance happened with the other blonde woman, who was Kate, who was a little more age appropriate. She had a little more depth to her, and yet her story was taken in this in a place of like, if that person in F1 was actually, you know, the first female technical director or whatever, she's not sleeping with the driver. Like, that's just not something that would have happened. But anyway, that's a little bit of a different story, right? So we know what happens with Sonny. But I feel like this story could have focused on Damson Idris. It could have focused on Joshua a lot more. If Simone Ashley had been, I don't know what those scenes were, I don't know what happened there, but if that was his girlfriend, that means he had a connection with somebody in the story, right? That I don't know if it maintained, if they broke up, if they stayed together, what happened. We could have seen so much more of Joshua being initiated well and getting mentorship and eldership from Brad Pitt's character, and it could have been about him, you know, and how he learned and what changed for him and so on. And maybe it would have been a really different story if we had been able to focus on Joshua and whatever Simone Ashley's character would have been named, I don't know. But we turned to the elder white male and the blonde women, and that's what we focused on in this story. And it almost feels like that happened in the editing, you know? It's like, could we have actually seen more of Joshua and his side of things, and what would the story have felt like then? We don't know. In
the opening scene, the background music is A Whole Lot of Love by Led Zeppelin.
Okay.
Right? And then there's We Will Rock You by Queen. These are not Joshua Pierce's musical tastes, right? So when the film opened, I was like, this is for this film's for me. That's like midlife white men.
Yep.
And so I'd say, you know, there's more focus on the relationship between Brad Pitt's character and Javier Bardem's character, Ruben. Their friendship starts early in the film, and that's more of a through line than anything to do with Joshua. The relationship with Joshua is like the sort of incomplete mentorship piece. And yeah, it's pretty striking. There's one point where I think the night where they have the meeting with Kate, and Kate just like had enough of this bullshit where they're fighting. They're not working as a team on the track. And so they show up at this bar and thinking he tricks them into a team meeting that's just the three of them, and they play poker together. But Brad Pitt's wearing all white, and Joshua's wearing all black. And Brad Pitt is white, and Joshua is black. And I was just like, ugh, God, what are you doing? What the hell are you doing right now? Like, this is not by accident, whatever. So the fact that there's a racial component to the mentorship was never mentioned. It's never mentioned in the thing. And, you know, this is, I assume, made in America kind of thing. So it's like, this is the major conversation we're having, the major crisis point, or one of them, and it's been there since the country started. So again, just like in the name of entertainment and distraction, we're trying to do some meaningful, like if you're a writer or director, you're trying to do something meaningful, and then you're either avoiding obvious things or you're just oblivious. Yeah, it could have been amazingly more interesting in terms of race, and I didn't know he had a girlfriend, and that would have been interesting to see, like how she relates to his transition when he becomes a little less interested in the noise and a little more interested in teamwork. Does she fall in love with that more, or is she turned off because she's on for the ride? So yeah, there's just a lot of misses here for sure. Race is one of them, relationship is one of them, even writing interesting dialogue and giving actors a chance to work through a transformation in less than 8 seconds on screen, you know, like Kate letting him just be as, you know, she doesn't fight for her love. She's just like, oh, that's just who he is. Maybe I'll see you down the track. That's good enough for me. And then
it was some cliche too. It was something like, I'll see you down the road. And she's like, haha, great.
on.
It's just like, really? That's all that was? That's where that goes? It was so disappointing that, I'm starting to think, the way that we're talking about this, I'm thinking about this movie as a tragedy, like that it's actually quite sorrowful to think about what this movie is and means. And, I care about this movie because this is what's being marketed to men. This is what's being shared with men, right?
F1, the tragedy.
F1, the tragedy, right? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I know for some F1 fans, I mean, this is a different topic, but it was a tragedy also in the sense of, like, apparently it didn't, it didn't even follow that very closely. It didn't follow the ethics and the honor and, like, what really matters to people in F1. The stories that are important in F1 were not the stories that were told here. This was just cars, with Brad Pitt as Lightning McQueen or whatever it is, right?
You mentioned Lewis Hamilton a number of times, and he's a real racer.
Yeah.
I believe he was one of the first black racers in F1.
Right.
And there was some stuff about that a few years ago, like, I can't remember the details now, but I think the other drivers really showed up in solidarity for him at one point. A bunch of other drivers really did something very symbolically powerful to show their solidarity and their welcoming him into that brotherhood. But, like, the guy's a real guy. Like, give him some space. He didn't even speak.
Yeah.
Like, and in the final race, like, the two of them are neck and neck, and that's when they have the spin out and stuff like that. So they're like, that's another lost plot line, also racialized character and a real person. And so I wonder if there's any comments from him about his take on the movie or his feeling about how his quote character was handled in the treatment of it or the editing or whatever.
Yeah, I know he was involved in the production, but yeah, I imagine there were lots of people who were involved, and there's so much money on the line that, telling that more vulnerable story, people may have just said, oh no, we're gonna do it this way. And I think the movie did well. I think people enjoyed it. I mean, there were parts of it that, the soundtrack was fantastic. Like, the filming was really cool with the race scenes and stuff. Like, it was enjoyable on that extremely surface level place. But couldn't we have had that and also that deeper story of, like, Lewis Hamilton's experiences with the Brotherhood and, what it was like being the first black driver and all these things? Like, I would have loved to have heard more of that story. I've had enough of Brad Pitt. Like, come on. We've seen this guy before.
I don't know. I've seen lots of Brad Pitt footage and stuff. I've seen him act a lot better than that for me. And there was a few lines, like, just shook me right out of the film completely. Like, every once in a while, just a real clunker, and I'd just be like, who's doing this? Like, and then I come back to, this is a reflection for me on the meta level. All right, so big meta level here. This is a reflection of me on where my culture's at.
Yeah.
They don't know how to get real. They don't know how to stay up. And so there are people doing that kind of work, and I want to appreciate them too for their tenacity to do it anyway, knowing that it's probably not going to make as much money as an F1 movie, or the risk involved, like, oh, you're that kind of writer or director, you didn't do well, your career's over. I do know some people in the film industry these days, and it's like, it's so hard to get any traction.
Yeah.
To especially at that level of dictating the terms of a film, like directing or writing or so on, editing. That again, the risk and the money involved just perpetrates the same incompleted story over and over again, like we've named today.
Yeah, and I think your point too, that the initiation is supposed to teach a boy in those cases how to face the challenges of that particular culture at that time. What a disappointment to see this movie from that lens, right? That, as you say, this is where our culture is at. This is what we're doing. We're not initiating people into, okay, what does it mean to make the world a better place? What does it mean to, face some of these extreme challenges that we're facing right at the moment, right? But I also wanted to mention there was a moment that I thought was kind of interesting, especially from the tarot archetype perspective, which is the card that Sonny would pull.
Cool.
And I was kind of wanting a bit more from that too, like, what does that mean to you? Like, why, and at the end he pulls a card, and I think we don't see what it is, and I was like, oh, it should be it would be the Jack of Diamonds, which should be the Knight of Wands, because the Knight of Wands is the one who goes without thinking, the one who wants the thrill of riding down that steep hill, the one that that's not going to go slow and like wait to survive and, you know, find out what happens next and learn a lesson. He just wants to go, right? And I feel like in the moment of the tarot story, the knight is very much in a moment of like going with passion, that the way that you've talked about that intensity, that focus, that spark, but it has nowhere to go, right? The knight needs to learn more lessons before he can become the king, right? Or whatever the next stage of his journey is. Because I feel like Sonny was very much stuck in Knight of Wands and couldn't get past that. And that's what this story is. That's what so many of these stories marketed to men are. That sort of flat line that we keep coming back to, of just being stuck, wanting to go fast, and that's it, right?
Right. Well, the dominant metaphor that I see in the culture is moving forward. At the end of the day, moving forward, it's like it goes this way. It doesn't look sideways. It definitely does not turn to look at history.
No.
And it's this conveyor belt, like what's useful, what's effective is forward motion, right? Quick. I'm a conflict facilitator, and people want quick outcomes. They want a quick solution. Like, I'm not here to solve anything. I'm here to facilitate conflict. I hope we might find a solution. And in an elderful sense, all solutions are temporary, even if they last a generation. The nature of the universe is change and movement. So this idea that we're going to stay static or something, it's silly. And we do need to look for solutions and stability within that, but not to get hypnotized that that's the way the world should be. But this idea that the only way to get anywhere is to keep going forward, in a sense, to keep going the same direction, to me is like super unhealthy.
Yeah.
I have a theory about the card. Okay, so I didn't
Tell
catch
me.
it the first time, but the second time, somewhere near the end of the film, there's a side shot of him sitting in I think it's in the car, and there's a 7 of clubs insignia on his suit. And I thought the card would be the 7 of clubs, because that's he's branded. That's his patch. So I thought, oh, that's the one, you know. But he'll never wear that suit again because he's not in F1. So again, the whole thing would start again. Like now it's a different card. Maybe he takes that card out of the pack. Maybe he's got to win 52 races to figure out, like, you know, how many cards he's going to use, whatever. I don't know. I thought they could have done more with that as well, like bring us into the ceremony, like you said, like why does he do this? What does it mean to him? The only thing that ever happens about the card is like, why do you choose a card? And he says, what card? It's like he deflects from the whole thing. He just moves away from it, which is in keeping
More bullshit, more avoidance.
More avoidance of anything authentic or anything that reveals himself. Just
right.
Joke away, walk away. Lost opportunity.
Yeah.
F1 the tragedy.
Okay. F1 the tragedy. That's what we've got to. So, David, what a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here. I loved this conversation. I feel like I have so much to think about and pull apart from that conversation about initiation as well. So thank you so much.
And thank you for, you know, I really admire your restless creative spirit. And,
that's a great way to put it.
And the podcast series, I didn't know you were doing this until you reached out. I'm like, yeah, of course she's doing a podcast series. That makes total sense. And this new book that you're working on, like I've mentioned your books to other people and some of the work you've done for and on behalf of women, I really, really appreciate and value. So just thank you for how you show up in the world, Julie. I really appreciate you.
You too. I feel the same way. Thank you so much, David.
Real pleasure. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you so much, everybody, for listening to and watching, if you watched, this episode of Popcorn Therapy with me, Julie Peters, and my wonderful guest, David Hatfield. I keep thinking I should take a little break from the podcast because I am working on this book about tarot and mythology that it's all I want to do is be in this book. And I think just be aware that I'm not going to be super steady about when these episodes come out, and you might see a little bit of a break from me this fall. I still want to do Night Bitch. There's just so many that I want to do. These ideas keep coming up. So you'll probably hear from me, but I might be taking a little break coming forward. So just make sure that you subscribe so you get those notifications. You can check in. If you follow me on Instagram or TikTok at Julie Peters Wellness, you'll also see a notification when the new episodes come up. So please do follow, subscribe, all of those things so that you're aware of when the next episodes come up. And if there does end up being a little bit of a break, look back at the archive. There's actually tons of episodes that you can go and check out on movies that maybe you loved as a kid or that have come out in the last couple of years or whatever it might be. So do check that out. Thank you so much for supporting me by listening. If you want to throw the show a tip, you can go to juliepeters.ca/tip me and just throw a couple dollars towards the podcast. That also just helps me to be able to keep going. And I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you next time.